It's safe to say that the last year has been a little bit hit or miss for Nintendo. And whilst they have had some absolutely incredible games release, both on the Nintendo Switch and the Nintendo Switch 2, we've also had some games that have been not so great. And today I'm going to go through the Nintendo Switch and Switch 2 games that I actually regret buying. And I do want to do a small disclaimer, not all the games that I mention on this list are bad. This list has a whole mix between good games that just had bad Nintendo Switch ports, some games which were good but ultimately just not for me, and also some games that I don't think were very good, but if you bought them and you enjoy them, then I'm just glad you didn't waste your money. And the first game on today's list is Drag X Drive. This is probably the game on the list that I have played the least amount of, because honestly, within about an hour of playing this, I knew that I was probably never going to pick this back up again. And whilst I did really enjoy the fact that this was a game that utilized mouse mode, I just found it not all that enjoyable to play, and I think that's the fault of just the entire game setup. You see, the matches themselves were kind of fun, as this is all controlled with either mouse mode or motion controls. So the mouse mode side of things controls you using the wheelchair, with it very much mimicking the motions of being in an actual wheelchair, which I thought was really cool. And then the shooting itself was done with motion controls. But the only issue is, Nintendo usually make games with motion controls be really accessible. Drag X Drive, however, doesn't really have that vibe. There's a lot of different elements going on, you have to do a lot of different things, and the game moves incredibly fast. The thing that really killed this game for me was just how difficult it was to play multiplayer. There was no easy way of setting up yourself as a team of 3 and playing online. Instead, you had to set up a lobby and then you just end up playing each other rather than playing other people online, and it was all just a little convoluted mess. And basically, I picked this up day one and I haven't felt the urge or the need to come back and play it again ever since. And that to me is a good sign that this is a game that wasn't worth its money. Okay, next up is a game that I actually found to be a big disappointment, and that was Little Nightmares 3. Now, ever since I finished Split Fiction, I have been desperately looking for more co-op games to play, and I genuinely thought Little Nightmares 3 was gonna be the one. And unfortunately, this let me down massively. Now, this is a game that released both on the Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch 2, but the reason this was a disappointment to me was the fact that this is a co-op game that didn't offer couch co-op. There was no split screen, no ability for 2 of you to play on the same system. And even though you can use Game Share to play this with a friend, your friend needs to have another Nintendo system and the ability to look at their own screen for this to be playable. Which, if I'm being honest, is not what I'm looking for in a co-op game, and I was very surprised that it was not an option. But the real disappointment I found with Little Nightmares 3 was the co-op game mechanics. Because whilst at first it was a lot of fun, running through the levels together, helping each other out every now and again, the issue is, after about an hour and a half, you realized there wasn't really much co-op to this game whatsoever. All of the mechanics were reused constantly throughout the game, and there was no evolution or change to the co-op mechanics. I also at points found myself just getting frustrated at the way some of the levels were done, with some of them having stealth elements to them, but the ways in which you were spotted didn't really make much sense and just made the levels frustrating. Now, one of the big selling points about this game was that it is a co-op experience, but you can also play this by yourself with the NPC controlling the other character. And I unfortunately think that this might be why the co-op mechanics are lacking slightly. And even though my NPC buddy was fine most of the time, there were also some occasions where he was very much not okay and was making the game even more difficult. So I couldn't imagine what it would be like if the co-op mechanics were even more intricate. This was also a relatively short experience for the price. I think it comes out at being under 10 hours. And considering the co-op mechanics stay more or less the same all the way throughout, this is a really difficult co-op game to suggest to many people when the likes of It Takes Two and Split Fiction cost marginally more for a much bigger and better experience. But this truly, unfortunately, was not what I was looking for. Next up, we have a game that I think is actually really good, but just wasn't for me, and that is Kirby Air Riders. Now I'm going to be honest, the reason I bought this was because of the second Kirby Direct. Everything that they showed us in that Direct and told us about made me feel like this was a game that I could maybe get into and really enjoy. So I decided to take a chance and buy it. Now the first couple of hours of playing this game, I truly felt like I had no idea what was going on. But my hope was that the more I played it, the more I'd understand it and the more fun I'd have. The issue is, I just didn't find that actually being the case, because I found myself not really wanting to pick this game up. There's so many elements to this I do really like. I love the fact that they have a story mode somehow in this game. I love the fact that there's so many different types of racing modes inside of it. So in theory, there'd be a racing mode for every single mood that you feel in for that day. There's also so many added on little bits, like the ability for you to hang out in a lobby, also for you to customize your very own rider. But for me, this is a game which I kind of spend around half an hour or so playing, and then I don't really pick it back up for like another week or so. I rarely find myself gravitating back towards it, and I feel like this is honestly a great game that has an incredibly niche audience. So by no means do I think this game is bad whatsoever. I actually think it's absolutely incredible. Just for me, it wasn't worth the price, considering how little I picked this thing up. Okay, the next game is probably the most controversial one on this list. Let's talk about Tales of the Shire. Now, I absolutely love cozy games and also The Lord of the Rings, so I feel like I was the target audience for this game. Now, the reason why this was so controversial was that this was a cozy game that was lacking a lot of cozy game mechanics that we're used to seeing. You see, in Tales of the Shire, the biggest focus was on the story, the frolicking in the countryside, and also the cooking. And a lot of the other cozy game mechanics that we're used to seeing were either very stripped back, like the relationship mechanics, or just not really present at all. And while some people absolutely loved what they got with Tales of the Shire, other people like myself felt like there was just a little bit missing. This also just didn't feel like the Shire I knew. When you ran around to different places, oftentimes the NPCs that you'd pass would be completely stationary. And if you're lucky, they may say a single line of dialogue before they do absolutely nothing. And I truly think it would have been better to have not had them at all than have them like this. This also committed probably the biggest sin there is in a cozy game, and that is having animals that you can't even pet. But the biggest issue I had with Tales of the Shire is that it was a fetch quest sort of game, which I have no problem with if the game didn't look the way it does on the Nintendo Switch. One of the biggest selling points of Tales of the Shire was getting to frolic around the beautiful Shire, but the Switch's performance just absolutely ruined this side of the game for me. So I think regardless of how you feel about the cozy game mechanics, the biggest letdown to me personally wound up being how the game actually looked on the Nintendo Switch. And even though there were lots of elements to like about Tales of the Shire, I truly feel like the potential for a Hobbit life sim was far greater than we got with this game. Next, let's talk about Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. My biggest issue with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is the fact that I wanted longer and more cutscenes. And Hyrule Warriors, in theory, delivers me exactly that. And the best part about Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment is the fact that we were told from the get-go that this had canon story in it, which if you've played Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, you'd know is a big deal. And whilst in theory this did deliver exactly what I was looking for, with there being extended cutscenes to everything that we knew happened in Tears of the Kingdom, and the ability to get to know a lot of the characters way better than we did from the Tears of the Kingdom cutscenes, this was still to me not worth the money. And that's because I just find Hyrule Warriors games way too repetitive for me to enjoy. I think I got around 12 hours into this game before I started to feel like I didn't really want to go into another battle. You see, each and every level you go into is more or less just button mashing a ton of enemies. And at first, it is really cool to get to know each of the characters, their unique battle styles, and figuring out how to defeat some of the larger bosses. As you get further through the game, you realize that there's just not a lot of variety to this combat style. And I think it just comes down to you're either someone who enjoys these sort of repetitive games, or you're someone like me who enjoys them at first, but after a while winds up just getting bored of them. And unfortunately, I got bored of the combat a little bit quicker than I sort of anticipated. And it wasn't long before I sort of thought to myself that I might be better off just looking up the cutscenes and watching them on YouTube. That being said, this game looked absolutely stunning on the Switch too. I was really impressed with how it played in handheld and on docked mode. So if you know you're gonna like this sort of game, this plays fantastically, and I think you're gonna love it. But it's definitely not a Zelda game for everyone. Next up is a controversial one, and one I'm trying to sort of figure out still as of this moment, and that is the Pokemon Legends ZA DLC. Now I want to start this by saying that I actually did enjoy my time with Pokemon Legends ZA. I also do obviously think that Game Freak could do so much more with the Pokemon franchise, and that some parts of this game were definitely feeling dated, like the fact that the cutscenes have no voice acting, no real sound effects, no real life to them. But regardless of everything that it was lacking, I still had a good amount of time and feel like I got my money's worth from the base game. Now I think the biggest issue I have with the Pokemon Legends DLC is just the fact that there's no excuse as to why this wasn't in the main game. You see, normally with these sorts of games, the DLC comes out a reasonable amount of time after the main game. But not only did they announce this DLC before the game even came out, it released just months after the main release for Pokemon Legends ZA, which makes me think that it was basically complete by the time the main game came out, which I really don't think is a trend I want to see continue with Game Freak. Now, the DLC story is all about how these portals, or as they call it, spatial distortions, are opening up all across the city. And it's your job to jump into them by feeding Hooper donuts and exploring them. And inside each of these portals, you'll be given different quests that you need to try and achieve, and it's also where you'll find new Pokemon in the game as well. But the main issue, and the reason why I'm not sure I find the value in the Pokemon Legends ZA DLC, is the fact that it just feels very repetitive. Now, don't get me wrong, Pokemon Legends ZA was in itself pretty repetitive, but I feel like the story had some sort of variety to it with what things you were doing, that it didn't feel overly monotonous all of the time. However, I don't feel that with the DLC. Everything looks and feels exactly the same. The different areas that you get to explore look identical to everything you already know. The only thing that really changes up are what Pokemon is in each area, and I feel like this just got monotonous very, very quickly and didn't really give me the same joy that I felt while playing the base game. Much like the base game of Pokemon Legends ZA though, I did enjoy the story. I actually think it's one of the better written Pokemon stories that we've got recently. There was one big thing that the DLC did that made it almost worth the money to me though, and that was making it easier to get the shiny charm, because for some reason they decided to change up how you get the shiny charm in this game and make it even worse, because normally all you have to do is complete the Pokedex and you'll get it. But in Pokemon Legends ZA, instead you had to get the shiny charm by completing a series of different tasks. Now, most of these revolved around catching Pokemon and filling up the Pokedex, which was fine. However, some of the biggest points you actually got by doing trainer battles. And before you got the DLC, you'd have to do 1,000 trainer battles in order to get the shiny charm. And this took a disproportionate amount of time compared to every other task there was, and was by far the worst part of trying to get it. And thankfully with the DLC, you could skip this task entirely and get points in other ways. But overall, pretty disappointed with this DLC. I wanted to see areas that weren't just the city, something outside of it. And I was disappointed to see that it was just more concrete walls. Next up, we have a fantastic game where I just didn't really get along with the Nintendo Switch port, and that was Campervan Make It Home. Now, if you're a lover of unpacking, then this, in theory, would be the game for you. But this time, instead of unpacking your belongings in different homes, you're packing up your belongings into a camper van. and you get to see what genius storage solutions await you in each of the different camper vans that you get to stock up. Now, the fun of camper van make at home, much like unpacking, was trying to figure out where each of the items belong and having the satisfaction of tidying up and placing each item in the correct space. My issue with the Nintendo Switch port was just the way everything looked. This game is unbelievably gorgeous on PC, and sadly it just didn't translate on the Nintendo Switch version, and this was the most apparent with things like the cabinets, which didn't even look like they were straight at points, and when you zoomed in on some of the items, the assets just looked really blurry. So this is more so a case of just buy this game, just not on the Nintendo Switch. On the PC it also works a lot better having a mouse, I think. So overall, great game, just not a great Nintendo Switch port. Okay, next up, let's talk about some Nintendo Switch 2 editions, because there are multiple that I just seem to regret. The first of which being the Mario Party Jamboree Switch 2 upgrade. The main issue I have with this is that it is not an add-on to the main game itself. It's basically a separate set of mini games in their own game mode. And what this DLC more or less boils down to is being a couple of additional game modes and mini games, all to do with using the webcam and the microphone. Now, the microphone is already baked into either your Joy-Cons or the Pro Controller, but the webcam is obviously an additional accessory that costs even more money. Now, Mario Party Jamboree is a staple to my Christmas day, so of course I sat down with my family to play it, and I'm going to be honest, we didn't really find ourselves using the DLC all that much. Now, there is the option inside of the DLC to play the traditional Mario Party mode, but adding in more of these mini games, which was a good thing to see. But for what the mini games actually are, I really don't think they're worth the money. And if you're someone who doesn't own a webcam, then this is especially not going to be worth your money. And if I'm being honest, the main thing that I got out of purchasing this DLC was just the visuals being upgraded for the Nintendo Switch 2. And that was more or less it. I sort of felt the same when it came to Kirby and the Forgotten Land with that DLC. Whilst I really liked the idea of it, and it did look absolutely gorgeous on the Nintendo Switch 2 with the resolution upgrade and the frame rate, the unfortunate thing is, because this was just replaying every single one of the main levels, with there being a little bit of a twist to them, is that I just wound up not really playing it or enjoying it as much as I would have done if they actually had given us full-on levels. And if they had instead spent their time making brand new levels with everything that we got from the DLC, I think it would have gone down so much better. And so far, I don't think I am a huge fan of Nintendo Switch 2 versions to existing games. At least the upcoming Animal Crossing one only costs us less than £5, so I'm less likely to find that a disappointment. But either way, I hope Nintendo step up their game, or just stop doing this in general and make them free upgrades. The final letdown on my list is one you probably already know about, and that is Tamagotchi Plaza. This is another one of those games where I played this once, did not have a great time with it, and then never felt the urge to come back. You see, Tamagotchi Plaza doesn't really have a story, and is instead just an assortment of mini games. And the issue is, some of these mini games I found to be kind of fun, and some of the mini games were cursed and I didn't enjoy them whatsoever. But to make any progress through the game, you need to play all of them. Now, I have never played a Tamagotchi game before, so I had no idea what to expect, which I think is why I was so disappointed with this one, because it really wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Now, as I said earlier, this is a game made up of essentially a group of mini games. But the thing that was really the icing on the cake for me and this experience was the fact that they don't really tell you how to play the mini games. And for some mini games, that was perfectly fine. Everything was pretty obvious, and I could figure out what I was doing. Some of the other mini games, however, I had no idea what I was doing, and I needed to go and look up a walkthrough on how to do them. And I'm going to be honest, I have a PhD in chemistry, and the fact that I couldn't figure out what was meant to be potentially a kid's game really frustrated me. There is a Nintendo Switch 2 version for this game as well that contains a few mouse mode mini games and also an upgraded resolution and frame rate, but for the price they're offering, I don't think either versions of this game was worth it. So this is really only made for the people who have played previous Tamagotchi games and absolutely love them, but for most people, this is gonna be a skip. That's it for my games that I regret buying, but if you want to see some of my absolute favorite Nintendo Switch games, click this video here.